Before we begin today's podcast, I wanted to answer the most emailed question that pops up in my inbox. Neil, how do you earn your living outside of this daily tech podcast? Well, seeing as you ask, if you're starting 2021 and have a long list of goals for the new year, but a lack of time to bring them to life, remember, you can work one-to-one with me in a number of areas. For example, if you want to hit record on a conversation in Zoom or Microsoft Teams, I can edit those files and help you launch your own podcast and help you have a show like this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and all the usual platforms. Equally, if your leadership team needs help with ghostwritten thought leadership articles, or you need someone to manage the content for your business blogs, pop by my website, techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find more information on how you can work with me. And you'll also find links to 1,500 interviews on the Tech Talks Daily podcast, plus my shows with Netgear and Citrix. But enough from me, on with today's show.
Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Greetings and salutations to everybody, apart from Morrison's Supermarket that failed to deliver my whiskey cocktail box and simply offered me a refund on Christmas Eve. But onwards and upwards. And here in the UK, Christmas Day usually involves a huge meal, followed by watching the Queen's speech and slowly falling into a food coma. So before I went there, I thought I would once again check in with you all and deliver my very own Christmas message. And looking back over the last 12 months, let's face it, it was a pretty crappy year, wasn't it? But as the Queen prepares for her speech, in fact, the Queen has embraced technology this year too, and for the first time, you can ask Alexa to play the Queen's speech, and she will oblige accordingly. And on the subject of our favourite digital assistant, I recently read that many are becoming increasingly concerned that asking Alexa to perform tasks without the need to say please or thank you is not having a positive effect on kids. Because if they're asking Alexa to do everything for them without using their manners, some kids are then almost seeing their mother in the same way and seeing women as subservient and their only purpose is to meet their every demand. I'm curious, is that something you've seen over the holidays, or is it just one of those news stories that comes out to bring us all down over the Christmas period? But looking back at last year, for me, it began incredibly well. I was lucky enough to attend a live tech conference in Las Vegas in January and then Chicago in March. But then, of course, we all know what happened next. And to cap it all off, I also lost my dad in the summer. And I know that many of you listening will have lost people that you love too. And that on its own makes this time of year especially difficult, with it being the first one without them. But when I first launched this podcast way back in 2015, I was inspired by two things. One, I learned that a few journalists had been selling links in their articles, and big publications online were now not only guarded, but just didn't want to feature content talking about a business or a startup story. And I thought to myself, there's so many rich startup stories out there and tales of how technology was solving real-world problems that was going unheard. So I decided to create my own platform where everyone could have a voice, share their experience, and maybe, just maybe, learn a thing or two from each other along the way. And two, I have always naively thought that technology works best when it brings people together. And as we head for over 2 million downloads in 165 countries, I cannot thank each and every one of you enough for joining me on this journey. And from the outset, I always made a promise that I would never talk about politics on this podcast, and I will continue to follow that rule. But over the last 12 months, I have noticed something that concerns me. And that is, in some circles, tech is no longer bringing people together. It is dividing them. And when we're locked inside our homes with 24-hour rolling news channels and algorithms pumping similar content onto our smartphone screens, and the reporting of worst-case scenarios as fact, and even in many cases using emotion to report the news, to tell you how to feel about a story rather than report it, kind of leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And it reminds me of a quote from, if anyone out there has read Harper Lee's famous book, To Kill a Mockingbird, there's a great line in there that goes something like, Atticus told me to delete the adjectives, and if I did that, I'd have the facts. And I think that has never been more true than right now, because big tech is getting a bad reputation for polarising and dividing people rather than bringing them together. And it often feels that everything is turned into binary arguments, and everything is either left versus right, masks versus no masks, black versus white, right versus wrong. And with 8 billion people on this planet, I like to think that our views are a little more nuanced and complex than just two options. Life's much more complicated than that. And for many of us, we've spent a lot more time in our homes and end up having our own views strengthened by platforms that are feeding our own opinions back at us. And then, as a result, many are finding it hard to deal with anything that questions their own narrative and anything outside of that echo chamber. And this kind of got me thinking. I was reflecting of having fond memories of having conversations in a pub with my friends and people with completely opposing views, but you didn't just go up to them and shout at them if they had an opposing view. You find that mutual ground, you talk it out, you have a debate. And that whole side of things seems to be missing, and something that I don't want us all to lose. And also, in a world where we're surrounded by big data, it seems that if our data can be digitised, it can be scrutinised, and many are finding that their digital footprints are coming back to haunt them. And whatever anybody did 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you're not going to be the same person now or you shouldn't be, because part of the reason we're on this planet is to learn as we go through. But there's so many memes flying around at the minute, and there's one that I wanted to share with you. It said, if you go to the southwest desert and catch 100 red fire ants, as well as 100 large black ants, and put them in a jar, at first, nothing will happen. However, if you violently shake that jar and dump them back on the ground, those ants will fight until they eventually kill each other. The thing is, the red ants think that the black ants are the enemy and vice versa, when in reality, the real enemy is the person that shook the jar. And that post goes on to say that this is exactly what's happening in society now. Liberal versus conservative, pro-mask versus anti-mask. The real question we need to be asking ourselves is who's shaking the jar and why. Now, I don't think there is some dark, sinister forces pushing all our buttons, but locking ourselves in our own echo chamber that strengthens rather than challenges our views is not a good thing. So I guess the crux of my Christmas message is to remember the key foundations of this podcast was always built on technology works best when it brings people together. We're all on this crazy roller coaster ride of tremendous highs and tremendous dips, but we all learn from each other. And in fact, after over 1,500 podcast interviews and speaking with you all in thousands of emails and direct messages, I always try and learn something from every conversation. And it's not always easy, I know that, but rather than have a Twitter feed surrounded by things that you like and you agree with, maybe introduce a few things that challenge those beliefs and try and see the argument from both sides and push yourself. And this also reminds me of a great interview I saw with David Bowie recently, and he said, when you go out for a paddle in the sea, everything is comfortable and nice and calm. But then you go a little bit deeper into the sea and you're just at waist level and still everything is comfortable and you're enjoying your surroundings, but possibly maybe still too comfortable. But if you dare to go out just a little bit further until you're on your tiptoes and your head is above water, but there is a slight struggle to keep it there, that is where you need to be in life. And after watching too many videos online, that is one in particular that stuck with me this year, because I think critical thinking and learning and pushing ourselves has never been more important. And as we prepare for 2021, I think we're going to be in for another challenging year. But there is light on the horizon. If someone or a platform tries to shake your jar, don't fall for it. Because if we use technology to bring us together rather than allow it to polarise and divide us, we will all remain on the right track. And I do think there will be a slight tech clash this year, and there will be some form of big tech crackdown as well on the likes of Google, Facebook, Amazon and Apple. But I remain excited about how technology is solving real problems in our lives, business and world. Because we should see exciting advancements in working from home technology, for example. And I do think we will increasingly see a huge focus on using technology to solve some of the world's bigger problems. And by that I mean sustainability, environmental, and doing more with less. Maybe having a little bit more awareness and respect for our planet's shrinking resources in which we all reside. Because it feels like we're all starting to think, work and live a little differently. And it feels like we're entering this big period of change, but I'm not sure exactly what is waiting. But this is just me, chatting into a microphone on Christmas Day, waiting for my Christmas dinner. And as you know by now, this podcast is not about me or the guests. It's about you coming on here, using this platform to share your opinions, your insights, your experiences. That's how it all works. So if you have never messaged me before, and you're looking around seeing all your family face down in their smartphones rather than talk to each other, why not send me a quick message now? Share your outlook for 2021, the good, the bad and the ugly. I want to hear it all. And let's have a good old-fashioned chat like we used to in the pub, but without getting outraged. So remember, technology really does work best when it brings people together. And I'm looking forward to joining you all in 2021. Every single day of the year, we will continue to share our journey together as restrictions lift. And I'll try and meet as many of you in person and get back to what I do best, man hugs in a non-creepy way. Now, my last piece of advice is remember, time is the only non-renewable resource. We can all go out there and do a variety of things to earn more cash, but you can never get time back. And if you've spent any time in a nursing home visiting a loved one, you'll know from those conversations that it's surrounded by people wishing they'd spent their time differently, wishing they had a better relationship with their son, wishing they spent more quality time with their family and less time at work. Nobody's in that nursing home wishing they'd earned more money or spent more time at work. So spend your time preciously with your loved ones, and if you cannot be with them due to these restrictions, why not use technology and spend some time creating something for them? A photo book, a video, a phone call, using tech to show someone that you care and you think about them. That will go such a long way right now. I think very often we all get a little obsessed with how many likes, how many shares and posting our own things, but it's doing stuff for other people that makes you all warm and fuzzy inside. That's what this life is all about. Right, I'm bordering on cheesy now, so it's time for me to go and get my Christmas dinner. But I do raise my glass of bourbon to you all. If you celebrate Christmas, a big happy Christmas. And if you don't, please accept my warm wishes and cheer wherever you are listening to me in the world. It will be business as usual tomorrow, but I just wanted to check in, give you all a genuine thank you for listening to this podcast, and especially listening to this one on Christmas Day morning. That is true commitment. So have a great one, enjoy your time together, and thanks for listening. But until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.